You're watching Eye in Africa here on France 24. I'm Julia Kim, and these are the headlines on the continent. Nigerian doctors on the front lines of the coronavirus pandemic go on an indefinite strike. They're demanding more pay and better working conditions. Cameroon's government threatens politicians with jail time if they disrupt upcoming regional elections. The warning comes after President Paul Biya announced the date for the country's first regional vote. And the stage is set for a standoff between Ethiopia's Tigray region and Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. Tigrayans prepare to vote for a regional parliament in violation of a federal postponement on elections. But first, over a third of Nigeria's doctors are on an indefinite strike over benefits and working conditions. It's the second time this year resident doctors have walked off the job. Now, they're pivotal to frontline healthcare in Nigeria, which currently has over 55,000 COVID-19 cases. The country's Labour Minister has called on them to suspend the strike and refrain from employing, quote, arm-twisting methods. France 24's Sam Olukoya has more from Lagos.
The doctors went on strike making a number of demands. One of these is the provision of personal protective equipment. They are also asking to be paid COVID-19 inducement allowance. They are also asking to be paid a hazard allowance. Then they said some of their they have been owed some salaries dating back almost 3 years. So these are some of the demands the doctors are making. They've went on strike before, and the government promised to look into their issue, and nothing has been done. That is why they went on strike at the moment.
And now this could really paralyze the country's health system. It's one of the continent's most populous nations. Why are they taking such drastic steps?
The doctors say they are taking these steps because they can't. They can no longer trust the government. If you recall, they went on strike earlier on, and the government did promise that it will look into this issue, but that wasn't done. So at this stage, they felt it was not possible to have any trust on the government. They want to really push the government hard. And I mean, even going back several years back, the fact that they are owed salary allowances that date back about 3 years ago, it shows for them that the government, what the government actually needs is some kind of hard measures. Of course, this is taking some toll on the healthcare system. Key of this is the COVID-19, the government's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Many of these doctors are involved in the isolation centers. Then also, given the general healthcare service, also many of these doctors are involved there. I mean, once we have this type of strikes, we often had cases of deaths. There was a strike recently, and then a patient was on ventilator, and the generator was switched off, and that patient eventually died. So it's this kind of problems we've seen over the years.
Well, let's turn now to Cameroon, where the government has threatened politicians with jail time if they disrupt upcoming regional elections. The warning came just hours after President Paul Biya announced a December the 6th date for the country's first regional elections. Now, they would include 2 restive Anglophone regions, which are in the throes of a 4-year separatist revolt. A number of political parties have already said they'll boycott the vote. France 24's Regina Sondo has more from Yaoundé.
The Territorial Administration Minister, Paul Biya, has said any politician aiming at disturbing or causing public disorder before the 2020 December polls is going to face the law. Indirectly speaking to the leader of the Cameroon Renaissance Movement Party, Maurice Kamto, he said that discontinuance of legal proceedings doesn't mean that charges have been dropped. He made this announcement hours after President Paul Biya convened the electorate for the country's first regional elections on December 6th. Now, the opposition in Cameroon has vowed that they are not going to be part of the election if the electoral code is not reformed, if a ceasefire is not declared in the restive English-speaking regions of Cameroon, and if a federal system is not set up. With ongoing violence in these regions as a result of the ongoing political crisis in the country, there is actually doubt if elections in this region regions is going to be free and fair. Conflict that has led to the displacement of hundreds of thousands of people and has claimed the lives of about 3,000 people.
In other news, South Africa's longest recession in nearly 3 decades has gone from bad to worse. Its economy shrunk by a staggering 51% in the second quarter of this year, when the country imposed one of the strictest lockdowns in the world. But even before the pandemic, South Africa was struggling to reverse a decade of economic stagnation caused by widespread corruption. Although most restrictions ended last month, 1 in 3 people are unemployed. On top of that, with almost 650,000 coronavirus cases, South Africa is still the worst hit country on the continent.
Partly COVID-19 have played a role, but we need to understand that South Africa was in recession before COVID-19. Hence now we speak about the 4th consecutive contraction. But now we need to look at what we need to do, which is economic recovery. And we really need to focus on that and apply and look at each and every sector and implement reforms in each and every sector, working with government and private sector, small businesses to boost this economy moving forward.
Well, let's take a look at some of the other stories making headlines on the continent this hour. South African sprinter TESTOSTERONE has lost her appeal against Sport's highest court over the suppression of testosterone levels. A Swiss tribunal upheld a ruling from the Court of Arbitration for Sport, requiring some female athletes to lower their naturally high testosterone levels before competing in certain events. Now that means the double Olympic 800 meters champion won't be able to defend her title at next year's Tokyo Games without taking medication. Semenya says she refuses to let World Athletics, quote, drug her. Demonstrators have gathered outside a court in Algiers to demand the release of journalist Khaled Drani. His appeal against a 3-year jail term has begun in a case seen as a barometer of press freedoms in Algeria. He was convicted last month for inciting an unarmed gathering and endangering national unity through his coverage of the Iraq protest movement. Drani has denied the accusations, insisting during his trial that he had merely been doing his job. And record floods in Sudan threaten to damage 2 of the country's most important archaeological sites. The royal pyramids of Nuri and Meroe are relics of the Kush dynasty that ruled from the 6th century BC. Workers there are scrambling to protect artifacts from rising groundwater, including ancient tombs buried nearly 10 meters underground. Authorities have declared a 3-month state of emergency there after floods devastated the country. At least 102 people are dead and over 500,000 people have been left homeless. Now the stage is set for a standoff between Ethiopia's Tigray region and Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. Tigrayans will vote for a regional parliament this Wednesday, flouting a federal postponement on elections due to the coronavirus. The government has blocked foreign journalists from covering the election, deeming it illegal. Nicolas Jamin has more.
The region of Tigray is at loggerheads with the Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. On Wednesday it will hold elections for a regional parliament. But the government is furious. It had postponed these polls all over the country because of the coronavirus. One political party in Tigray is even calling for outright independence.
So many people have started to question Ethiopia itself, and many in the intelligentsia, the youth, have started to agree with our analysis. So at this moment, the acceptance is beyond our expectation.
Abraham Gebremedine is a Tigrayan pop singer who usually champions national unity. But because of the current tensions, he recently decided to move back to Tigray.
በዚህ ጊዜ ከህዝብና ከአድናቂ ከወዳጆቼ ጋር ከትግራይ መንግስት ጋር መቆም ያለብኝ ጊዜ በመሆኑ ምክንያት ወደዚህ መጥቻለሁ።
Abiy Ahmed's government said the elections in Tigray were illegal, but that it would not use force. Abiy Ahmed is from the majority Oromo ethnic group. Since he became prime minister 2 years ago, the Tigrayans have seen their influence diminish greatly. Their former leader, Meles Zenawi, led the armed struggle that toppled the Marxist Derg regime in 1991. Though he was from a minority ethnic group, his party then went on to dominate Ethiopian politics for nearly 3 decades. Today, Tigrayan leaders say they have been unfairly targeted in corruption prosecutions and sidelined from top positions.
And finally, cable cars at South Africa's Table Mountain are taking visitors again after being closed for 5 months during the coronavirus lockdown. With borders still closed, the Table Mountain Aerial Cableway in Cape Town is hoping to lure local tourists to the scenic spot. Usually, cable cars take 65 people, but since reopening, a single cable car can now only carry a maximum of 26, including one staff member. Taking in those views there. That's it from us here in Eye on Africa. There's more news coming up. Stay tuned to France 24.